This morning we're going to be in the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. I know that is where it's going. Someone plugged it up for me after last week. The book of 1 Samuel. You'll find that before the book of Psalms, a few books before the book of Psalms, in that first section there. But 1 Samuel begins off by telling the story of Hannah. Hannah was the mother of Samuel. Now Samuel, of course, was a prophet. We know later on that Samuel is the prophet that goes and ordains David to be king over Israel. Samuel is also the prophet who ordained Saul after the people came to him and said, "We want a king like other people." So the story of 1 Samuel is the story of a God, not of a God, a nation, but of a nation whose king, or whose Lord, was God of all creation, who chose and said, "We don't want him to be our king anymore. We want to choose a man to be king." That is the story of 1 Samuel, where we are. 1 Samuel was written around 630 BC is when it began. And I believe that it spans about 80 or 90 some odd years here. It was written by the prophet Samuel himself. He was telling of his own story of his mother and then his story as he went through life. But later, towards the end, we find that the prophets Gad and Nathan actually finished up that book for Samuel. So that's just a little bit of history on the book for your information, FYI there. But 1 Samuel chapter 1 and chapter 2 tells the story of a young woman. A young woman who knew heartache, but a young woman who loved God with all of her heart. We're going to start reading. We're going to go through, not through the whole story. I'm going to just tell you some of the story. But we're going to go through the first few verses here and take a look and set up the situation of Hannah. 1 Samuel chapter 1. Now there was a certain man of Ramathim, Zophim, of the mountains of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. Now again, I have to say, in the future we will have the deacons reading the scriptures like this for me. But I'm just kidding. All those names. Well, he had 2 wives. And every man's heart stops in the congregation. All right, youth, let me ask you a quick question. There's only 2 of you this morning. Let me ask you a quick question. Just because the Bible said it happened, does it mean that it's okay? Oh, that's right. This man had 2 wives, and you'll see that this causes problems. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other, Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. This man went up from the city yearly to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. Now, this is a good man. I want to tell you, I do a study on 1 Samuel. I love this particular book. It's a great book to study through. And one of the things that I notate from the beginning that I want you to understand, and as you read on, if you see some of the rest of the story, you'll realize Elkanah is a good man. He is a good man. Yes, he got 2 wives, one somehow along the way, and he shouldn't have. But he is a good man. He serves God. He goes yearly to give sacrifices, and he gives to his family so that they can give sacrifices to the Lord. He loves God. He wants to do what's right, and he is willing to do whatever is necessary to serve God. You'll find that out at a certain point. And Hannah is the same way. Now verse 4, it says, "And whenever the time came for Elkanah to make an offering, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to her sons and her daughters. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah." Parents, I think the scriptures are very clear. Let's be careful. Hopefully we're not talking about 2 wives, but there are several scriptures that we see, especially in our early patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that we see favoritism going on. You know, there's one thing I love about my mom, is growing up, I don't believe that my mom had a favorite. Now, if my sister was here, I'd say it was Tiffany. There's no doubt. But she's not here. So the reality is that I don't believe that my mama had a favorite at all. I remember my mom, this was a story I wanted to tell because This just tells you how much my mom loved me and my sister. We grew up, and I'm thinking of the memories. We lived in Germany, and I have very vague memories of Germany. That was a long time ago. I was very, very young. But I remember, the things that I remember about Germany is I remember the apartment building we lived in, and I remember the park behind it. I remember taking glass jars and catching bumblebees. You know, they'd land on the flower, and you'd do like that and turn the lid, and we'd catch the bees. I remember that. And I remember always taking it to Mama. And I remember Mama being out there with us. And I remember her singing along to Another One Bites the Dust. Doesn't matter. But the point being is, I remember those things. Then I remember we moved to Texas, and I remember I went to Pebble Hills Elementary School. And I remember Mama taking me into the school classroom. I remember Mama making this paper mache, this gigantic little paper mache, big old head for Halloween. And I couldn't walk. I kept tripping over walls, and my sister would try to help me up, and Mama was with us, and I had this big old giant head. And I remember Mama sitting down and going over and over and over my times tables with me, over and over and over and over and over again. I remember all these things. I remember later on as we moved back to Georgia, I remember Mama helping with my homework. I remember Mama taking us to the park. I remember Mama just doing all these things. She was just always there. I remember all of this stuff, just constant throughout my life. Mama was always there doing things with us. You know, all of this. But now my mama was a nurse. My mama put my father through school twice, working while he was in school. My mama, when I was an adult, sat down with my sister and I in tears and begged us to forgive her because she wasn't there for us when we were young. You know, I don't ever remember my mom not being here. Now, I remember my mom, I clearly remember my mama coming home from work in the morning time, getting us ready and taking us to school. I clearly remember Mama working all nights and coming home, but we had activities on this Saturday, so she would take us to do what we needed to do. I clearly remember all those things, but I don't remember Mama not being there, ever. Most of my Mama's life, she worked double shifts. Most of my Mama's life. And I don't remember, but my Mama, with tears in her eyes, begged us to forgive her for not being there. That's a Mama. That is a Mama. My Mama did not treat one or the other differently. My Mama did not put anything before us. It didn't matter if she had worked the middle of the day all the way to the night, then the whole night second shift, and came home. We always came first, both of us. She loved us. But here there was some rivalry. Elkanah would always give more to Hannah because he loved Hannah. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb. Hannah was a woman who loved God. We'll find that out more. She loved God. She served God. But Hannah desired to have a child. But God had closed her womb. Verse 6. And her rival, this would be Peninnah, this would be the other wife. And her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable because the Lord had closed her womb. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord God, I ask you to open up your word to us. Lord, I ask you to teach us this morning. We love you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. So the characters we have here are these. We have Elkanah. He's the husband or the father. We have Hannah, who is the wife that he loves, but the Lord has closed her womb. She has no children. We have Peninnah, Elkanah's other wife. And she is very, very abusive to Hannah. Makes fun of her and puts her down. You can imagine the jealousy. You can imagine all of the soap opera, all of the stuff that's going on in this household because of the original sin, taking two wives. But through all of these things, Peninnah chose to be spiteful, to be mean. Now, over the course of this chapter, we don't know what the time progression is exactly, but we do know that this happened for many years because Peninnah had many children, had sons and daughters, and continued to have children. And year after year after year, they would go to Shiloh so that they could make the sacrifices that they needed to make. Every year, faithfully, they would go, and every year, faithfully, he would give a double portion to Hannah. And Peninnah would just get angrier and angrier. And she would make more and more fun of her. And she would beat her down more and more and more. Every year this happened. Every year this happened. And Hannah got sadder and sadder until one year, one particular year that we see here, she can't take it anymore. She stops eating. She can't sleep. All of her thoughts, everything about her is thinking of this child. She wants a child. She wants to bless her husband. She wants to bless her God with a child. Her desire is so strong. I don't know if any of you have ever been in that place. Amber and I were married at 20 years old. We decided to start trying to have children at 25. But it was 6 years before God blessed us with Ethan. And we thought we couldn't have children. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong. They tried everything. Finally, after 5 years, they tried one more thing. And he said, you have 3 months or 6 months? 3 months, well. Anyway, you have 3 months. And if it doesn't happen in that time period, then chances are you'll never have a child. And that time came, and that time passed. And then just a couple of weeks after, I come home from class. We had gone back to college. I come home from class. And Amber holds up a little baby Baron. The Barons were from Ruth Parker College, a little Baptist college I was going to. And she surprised me. And I said, are you sure? Are you sure? And she said, yeah, that's what it says. I said, did we talk to the doctor? No, let's go to the doctor. We jumped in the car and sped to the doctor. They were about to close. The doctor's office was in Douglas. It was about a little, right at an hour's drive away or so. We made it about 35 minutes. And we got into the doctor before they closed. And it was funny because those nurses, they had seen us for years now. They knew Amber. And they walked in straight faced and said, it's positive. It was a great joy. But if you've never been in that situation, it is a hard situation. I remember the feelings that I had. I remember, men, what we think. I thought to myself, I want an heir. And to be honest with you, in the Clemens family, there were only 3 of us guys. It was myself and my 2 cousins. My 2 cousins, one had no interest in marriage, family, anything, still is not. He's several years older than me, has no interest in any of it. The other got married, is professional, he trains horses and things near Chicago. But he and his wife are professionals. They had no interest in children, never have, never will. And so it was, Grandpa always knew it was me or nothing. And now for so many years we couldn't have a child. So for me, looking in the eyes of my dad and my grandfather, I wanted a child so bad. But I tell you, all of that would fade away when I looked at Amber and I saw the heartache in her because she could not have a child. This is what Hannah felt. We don't know how many years went by, but it was year after year after year. And not only did she feel that way, but she had this other one who would constantly bring it up, throw it in her face, and tell her she was worthless because she could not have children. Because to be honest with you, in the culture of the time, that was what many people thought. So finally this particular year comes. Hannah can't eat. She can't sleep. She can't do anything but just cry and cry and cry. So finally she finds herself there at the synagogue. She goes in. She kneels down and she begins to pray. Now, understand, back in those times it was different. The prayers at that time, the traditional way of doing it, when you went into church and you knelt down and prayed, you would pray openly. You would speak. You wouldn't necessarily pray for others to hear, and it might be quiet, but you would speak the words to God. Hannah went in, and her heart was so broken. She was so distraught that she knelt before her God. And she began to mouth the words, but no sounds would come out. She just began mouthing the words, praying, asking God to bless her, asking God to give her a child. And there's another character that comes in, Eli. Now Eli is the high priest. He's the man in charge, okay? He comes in and he sees her over there, and he doesn't hear anything come out of her mouth, but she's over there rocking, and her lips are moving, and different things like that. He's not sure what's going on. So he goes over and says to her, listen, you can't be coming in here drunk now. You take that somewhere else. Do you imagine being a heartache? That's what the first thing the preacher says. That was similar to what I said to Angel Officer. But anyways, he comes up and he says, you need to get out without being drunk now. He seriously says that. And she says, no. She says, no. She says, no, I'm sorry. She says, but I'm just so heartbroken. My heart is so broken because of my cry to the Lord, because of my prayer that I'm setting before the Lord, that I just can't speak, and I'm just begging the Lord to bless me. She never tells him for what. But Eli looks down at her. He just simply says, well, may God bless you with what you were asking. Now, our Sunday school class knows that at these times the priests were given such a blessing that it was told to them from the time of Levi, it was promised to them that when they gave the blessing that God would honor that. So Hannah heard from the high priest himself, heard that God would bless her with what she asked for. So right away, she dried the tears. She stood up. She went, she ate, she went with her husband. And from that point on, no matter what Peninnah said, no matter what went on, she trusted that God was with her and God was going to bless her. Now, we don't know the time frame. It could have been within a year. It could have been within the second year. We don't know. There are certain things that give us an indication that maybe it wasn't right away. You think, well, she had this great faith. That's wonderful. But as time goes by, faith sometimes slips away. But there are indications that it might have been quite a bit of time that went by. But at some point, Elkanah knew his wife, and she conceived. And then she bore a son, and she named him Samuel. But now there was one other thing that I have not told you yet. As she laid there praying to God, she said, God, if you will bless me with a child, I will take that child and I will give him to you for your service for the rest of his life. So Hannah, and the reason, some of the things that I say that Elkanah was a good man, a man who trusted God and loved his wife and trusted his wife's relationship with their God, was because she had made this commitment to give her son to the church, to give him to the keep of Eli, to serve as a priest or whatever God wanted him to serve. As we know that he became one of the greatest prophets. But she gave him to them. She waited until he was weaned, which at that time was usually around 4 years was on average back then, 4 to 5 years even. But she was waiting until he was weaned. Then she did not go each year with her husband until he was weaned. But the year that he was weaned, she went with her husband. And she went to the temple or the synagogue. She went to Eli and said, I don't know if you remember me, but I was the one here those years ago that was praying for God to give me a child. That's what I was praying, and God has given me a child. But I promised that I would take this child and I would give him to the Lord's service. And she handed her child to Eli for him to raise and to be in the service of God for the rest of his life. And you say, but she struggled so long. She cried so much. She had so much heartache. Why would she give her son away? Well, as we read, we realize that it was all in God's plan. This was the plan that God put in Samuel's heart. And don't worry, she didn't get to see him. She came every year, and every year she would make a brand new coat and a brand new ephod for him to wear in his service in the temple. Even as a young boy of 6, 7, 8 years old, he was serving and doing priestly duties within the synagogue there. So she would come every year and she would see him. But he belonged to the Lord. Now God continued to bless Hannah. It's kind of like with Amber. Once we got Ethan, we had 2 years later there was the other one. 2 years later there was the other one. And the big surprise 7 years later. But so the Lord kept blessing Hannah, and Hannah went on to have sons and daughters, which is wonderful. And of course, she was able to keep them and raise them and love them. But this one that she had made this deal with God, she was willing to give up to God. You know, I think today, as my children grow older, I think, what if God calls my child to somewhere around the world where they're killing other Christians? What if God says to my child, I need you in the underground church in China, or the underground church in the Middle East, or I want you in Korea, or I want you in Somalia, or I want you in any number of these places that, I don't know if you know it or not, but we have secret missionaries through our Southern Baptist Convention in all of these closed countries. They're there, they live underground, they're there either under other pretenses to teach or to do other things, or businessmen, but they are there because God has called them into that ministry. And if they are found out, then the best that we can hope for is that they get thrown in prison. Because how many of our brothers and sisters now are being killed over there? But I think, what if God calls one of my children to serve Him in that way? Hannah was not just willing to raise a child for the Lord and then let the child choose his path with God. Hannah actually gave her child to the service of the Lord. Literally gave him away at a young age. This morning, I kind of just make one point before we close. And we're going to close in prayer and be out of here just a little bit early, because I want everybody to make sure that you can get with your mom if you need to, and go to graduation soon. But I think, how could Hannah have done such a thing? How could Hannah have given her child away? And the only answer that I could come up with is this, is that Hannah chose to put the will of God, chose to put all of her faith, her love for her child, all that she had in God's hands. She was willing to trust that if God wanted her child, if God wanted him, then God had a purpose for him. She didn't know if that meant life or if that meant death, what it meant, but she understood one thing, that whatever God's desire and God's will for her child was, that was what was best. That was what was best. And mothers, you do all kinds of wonderful things. Like I told you, my mama worked double shifts constantly, night times, everything else she could do.